All right, we start tonight with the Trump-hating Washington Post. Now, last night they released a story saying that President Trump gave the Russian foreign minister and ambassador classified information while they were visiting the White House last week. Now, this story has been denied by Trump administration officials who were actually in the room. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said it was bogus. He said, quote, "I was in the room. It didn't happen." And Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, he denied the report, but that does not stop the Destroy Trump media from running wild with all of this. Watch this biased, abusively biased, so-called news. It's really fake news coverage. Watch this.
The White House reeling from another Russia crisis, an unforced error at the hands of President Trump.
The damage to U.S. intelligence interests is being viewed as incalculable this morning.
After this story broke here last night, we heard yelling behind closed doors here in this West Wing. Robin, this is a White House in chaos right now.
If true, this could be the most significant and dangerous mistake of the Trump presidency.
Hyperventilating breathlessness. We're going to have more on the Destroy Trump media's bias covered later in our news segment. It's called the Fake News Roundup. You don't want to miss it. But let's talk about the Washington Post for a minute. This is the same newspaper who has on their homepage the slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness." And just last week, remember, the Post reported the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, he was threatening to quit because of Comey's firing. Well, guess what? Rosenstein, and they cited anonymous sources, well, he spoke in an on-camera interview and he said, "I'm not quitting. I never threatened to quit." But that wasn't the only story the Washington Post got wrong last week. After Comey was fired, the Post reported this headline, quote, "Comey sought more resources for Russian probe just days before he was fired by President Trump," officials say. Well, guess what? Wrong again, because the acting FBI director, Andrew McCabe, when testifying before Congress last week, said he was unaware of such request. And he also went on to say, "We have plenty of money for this. We have adequate funding." So let's put the latest Washington Post fake news story into context. You got two stories they published last week dead wrong. Anonymous sources. They're losing a ton of credibility. And that fits into a much broader narrative that we have been dealing with almost exclusively here in the media on this show. The media is now so corrupt that their anger towards the president is now stopping them from doing their jobs. It's why I have spoken about changing the White House and how they handle the press. I've said they need to restructure daily briefings. Now, the Destroy Trump media, well, they turned them into nothing more than a dog and pony show. I explained this last night. The White House press team, they should develop a list of the top 15, 20 issues of the day, let members of the mainstream media submit questions about them beforehand and afterwards, and they could have all their questions answered in detail and then ask questions from there. Also tonight, another massive breaking news story. Explosive developments in the mysterious murder of former DNC staffer Seth Rich that could completely shatter the narrative that, in fact, WikiLeaks was working with the Russians, or there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Now, if true, this could become one of the biggest scandals in American history and could mean that Rich could have been murdered under very suspicious circumstances. Now, according to former homicide detective Rod Wheeler, who has been hired by the Rich family to investigate the killing, newly discovered evidence shows that the 27-year-old former DNC employee was, in fact, communicating with WikiLeaks before he was gunned down in Washington, D.C. That was back in July of 2016, July 10th, while he was walking home. Seth Rich, shot in the back, left for dead. Police have been saying and characterizing this as an attempted robbery gone wrong. Here's a problem, and that's an odd explanation because, well, the assailant didn't take anything from Rich. They didn't take his phone, his wallet, his watch, his necklace. They were still on his person at the scene of the crime. And now, while there are several key questions about why Rich was killed, well, here's what we do know. 12 days, exactly 12 days after Rich died and was killed, WikiLeaks published the leaked emails from the DNC. And after Rich's death, WikiLeaks offered a $20,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the person or the people responsible for the murder. And then, back in August, during an interview on Dutch TV, Assange implied that, in fact, Seth Rich was his source. Take a look at this.
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago. for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
no, there's no finding. So
What are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States.
That's pretty profound. Now, this new information is also consistent with what Julian Assange told me back in January when I asked him specifically, did Russia give him any of these emails? Now, keep in context here, in all the years WikiLeaks, 11 years, they've never been proven wrong. Watch this. Did Russia give you this information or anybody associated with Russia?
Our source is not a state party. So the answer for our interactions is no.
Now, during that same interview, I also asked Julian Assange about a report saying that a disgruntled Democrat, and not the Russians, gave John Podesta's emails to WikiLeaks. Take a look at this. There was one report in the Daily Mail that suggested somebody that you are friendly with actually was handed the documents at American University in a wooded area by a disgruntled Democrat who felt betrayed because the revelation showed that Bernie Sanders had been betrayed, and they didn't like the corruption of the Clinton Foundation. Can you confirm or deny that? Is that story true?
Well, that statement came from Craig Murray. He
friend of yours?
Friend of mine. He's been here several times. But WikiLeaks is a source protection organization. We are famous for never having exposed one of our sources over 10 years. That's why sources trust us and they come to us. So I can't comment on other people's statements about our sources, except to say what we have said, which is that our sources are not a state party.
And the mystery deepens. Now, let me connect the dots from here. Now, from my perspective, this could be a very huge bombshell story. If this is true, and Seth Rich gave WikiLeaks these DNC emails, which ultimately led to the firing, remember Debbie Wasserman Schultz on the eve of the DNC convention? This blows the whole Russia collusion narrative completely out of the water. Now, maybe Seth Rich was upset that the DNC was conspiring to hurt Bernie Sanders and help Hillary Clinton win the nomination. Now, we learned from those released emails, remember this, that that was the case. And then finally tonight, 5 powerful forces. I want you to understand exactly what's happening here, because the intensity, the fervor to get this president has been more fierce than ever. You have 5 forces aligning against President Trump. You've got the Destroy Trump propaganda media, the Destroy Trump Democrats, the Washington deep state establishment, meaning some in the intelligence community. You got weak established Republicans, never Trumpers. They now seem to be working together in an unprecedented attack against the sitting president. Now, let's start with the Destroy Trump propaganda media. Now, they have been working around the clock since November. Oh, that's right. They were colluding with Hillary before the election. But since then, to smear, slander, besmirch, character assassination against the president, any means necessary, and they have been against President Trump from the beginning. Remember, it was a funeral for most of these people on television on the night of November 8th. On top of that, you may remember this.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
We better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next. I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on. Sorry to laugh.
Which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
Oh, they were laughing then. I don't know if they're laughing now. Now they're in intense take Trump down mode. But then you got the tin foil hat conspiracy theories about President Trump colluding with the Russians, despite up to this point, no evidence that these liberal crackpots they've been pushing forever. Where's the evidence? Now, the media's become completely unhinged. They're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. And as we have been continually pointing out right here on the show, the truth does not matter to people that call themselves journalists. They are agenda-driven. They're radical left-wing ideologues who are more than happy to push and advance Democratic talking points and political conspiracies. Now, what do we know to be true is what, in this case, WikiLeaks did expose. Remember, the countless members of the Destroy Trump media, they were caught colluding with the Clinton campaign. Their main objective, they wanted to get Hillary elected, which explains why they have been perfectly willing to say anything, do anything, regardless of how insane, conspiratorial it may sound, all in an attempt to damage the president. Now, number two, you got this alliance. You got sore loser Democrats. They're still in total and complete denial. They can't believe that Donald Trump won and Hillary lost, that Donald Trump's the president. Now, they've also made it very clear that they're going to obstruct every single agenda item of the president at every single turn. For example, look at the firing of James Comey. Democrats, they hated the guy's guts. They were calling for his head for months, and they even blamed Comey for Hillary Clinton's election loss. Then President Trump's, he fires the former FBI director. All of a sudden, Democrats change their tune, feigning moral outrage, which exposed them to be nothing more than a bunch of partisan hypocrites. And you've got the third alliance. You got the deep state in Washington targeting the president selectively, now on a daily basis, as you saw earlier tonight and last night, leaking information. We told you at the top about the bogus fake news story from completely unreliable Washington Post that they were wrong all those times last week. Last night it was claiming that President Trump allegedly leaked information to the Russians. They didn't care when Hillary did it. Now, to me, it's clear what the motive is here. Some people inside Washington, D.C., the deep state, they are selectively leaking information to try and damage the president. You may remember back in January, the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, remember he issued this warning to the president-elect about the capabilities if he takes on the NSA, the deep state, the intelligence community? This is what he said.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
6 ways in Sunday. The deep state will get you one way or the other. Is that what James Comey was doing tonight, seeking revenge? And by the way, since that warning, we've seen unprecedented leaks, including to the New York Times tonight. We have transcripts of the president's calls with foreign leaders. They've been given to the press. Where did they come from? Drafts of executive orders shared with the media. Information meant to damage the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. That was handed out. And then after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was caught up in incidental surveillance, he was then unmasked. And then, in violation of the Espionage Act, that classified information was also released to the press. A felony, in case you're interested. Number 4 in this alliance, the establishment Republicans. So many of these people, so weak, so timid, they're spineless, they're feckless, they have no vision. They never supported the president, their own candidate during the campaign. Now, the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, he came out last night and called the report bogus, in spite of all of these people. Finally, number 5, we have never-Trumpers. They're revitalized, so-called Republicans. They didn't like President Trump during the election, and now they seem to want him to fail so they can say to themselves, they're right. They're so desperate to become relevant again. So it's time to call out this alliance, these 5 groups, for what they are and what is actually happening here.